But the gray-haired guy I see in the mirror, I keep going, who is that? And why is he in my bathroom? And realistically, my hair started going salt and pepper when I was 20. I've been gray for years now. I mean, literally, I've been gray longer than I haven't been gray. And it doesn't bother me. You know, I have buddies of mine that dye their hair every week. I'm like, really? You have that kind of time?
They go.
Really?
I was going to say.
So, you asked about steganography. Yes. I will tell you that there have been studies, and it depends on who you talk to. So, who doesn't know what steganography is? Okay. So, the most classic form of it, and steganography simply means hiding in the open. It's from a Greek term. And so, the most common form you hear about it and see of it is you take a JPEG or a picture, and you embed words or other documents in between the pixels, and you give somebody that picture, and if they have the software, they can pull that document out and see what you wanted them to see. For many years, there was discussions that Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda, all those types, were using that methodology to pass information amongst themselves without being noticed by government and by law enforcement. It depends on who you talk to. I have talked to professors in the DC area that say it's totally bogus. They never found a single instance of it. And then I may or may not have talked to people at NSA who said, oh yeah, we got stacks of it, you want to see it. So it depends on who you talk to, you know, who you trust, whether it's your professor or the NSA. You know. In my case, by the way, I trust the NSA about as far as I can throw this building, and yes, I've worked for them. As a matter of fact, while I was in DC, I was an instructor at the Defense Cybercrime Training Academy. If it's a 3-letter or 4-letter agency you've ever heard of, I probably taught their guys. So NSA, CIA, NCIS, I could go on. It becomes an alphabet soup after a while. And again, no one's more surprised than me when I go teach this stuff and I see what I think are veteran officers sitting in the room, and I tell them something I think is fairly basic, like double gloving, for example, and they're taking frantic notes, and I'm like, really? You didn't know that? Okay. But I will also tell you the one thing I've learned, and the reason I like to do this kind of thing, and teach other officers. Who's the smartest person in the room? Very good. Because I'm going to tell you right now, all of us are smarter than any of us. And so people ask me why I like to teach and lecture, because I hear from you. You give me great new ideas. And if nothing else, I'll throw something out when I'm teaching. And somebody say, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Oh, yeah. Cool. Something to add to my arsenal. And we all learn from each other, and we share. And so, I mean, I do it all night in some cases, because I've got friends that I've been doing this with for as long as they've been around, and we'll get calls. You know, we'll call each other. Dude, I got a case. I got this kind of hard drive. I hit this, I hit this, I hit this. Any ideas? As a matter of fact. Here. I found a way to break that 12 weeks ago, something like that. Whatever. Here you go. And we share. In law enforcement, you see it on TV all the time, and it's absolutely true. You know, you're a local cop, my crime scene. And then the feds come in and go, leave, our crime scene. And it's very territorial, and they don't share anything. FBI doesn't share anything with anybody. They don't even share amongst themselves half the time.
Was supposed to compare that.
Right. Yeah.
Wasn't that supposed to be interagency sharing after 9/11?
Supposed to. Let me know if it ever happens.
The NSA doesn't share.
It's like, and here's another thing, and I'll explain why this happens. You'll see this in life as you work in different companies. You'll go work somewhere, and there'll be some guy that's worked there forever, right? And he knows how this one machine works, for example. And you ask him, how does that work? He goes, well. No, seriously, how does it work? I'm not telling him. Because he thinks if he's the only one that knows, he's got job security.
That's an IT thing.
Okay, you want to know what real job security is? Share. Make sure everybody in your circle that you work with knows what you know. If you get known as that guy, it means you can go up into the White House. It means you can actually walk up to the president. You're trusted that much. It also means that once you get a Yankee White status, you're stuck at the White House for 3 years, period. You don't go anywhere else. That's the penalty for getting that level of security clearance.
My old boss was the, carried the football.
Yeah. I wouldn't want that job either.
He carried, anybody know what the football is?
Particular codes.
My former boss carried the football. He worked for the, he was with the Coast Guard, cybersecurity.
It circles through their forces. So I can't remember if it's every president or every year, something like that. So Coast Guard does it 1 year, Navy does it a year, Army does it a year,
I didn't know
whatever.
if she did anything, that's why it shocked me.
Yeah.
I was like, he didn't like that.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak as to the latest software you guys are using for forensics, off-the-shelf software?
Sure. The big three in digital forensics are Encase, E-N-C-A-S-E, made by Guidance Software. It's the grandfather. Encase is going, or Guidance, the company who owns Encase, is going through a little bit of internal trouble right now. The original founder and the board of directors are having a war. It's still a good program. I've been using it for years. I stopped at version 6.14 because version 7 is god awful. I mean, universally, you talk to any forensic guy out in the field that didn't start with 7, and they hate it. I have 7 at work. I try never to fire it up if at all possible. And I'll use the older versions because I can still get what I want done with that. So Encase is probably the #1 tool. Second behind that is a tool called FTK, or Forensic Toolkit, made by a company called Access Data. It's a great tool, but it's a beast. If you don't have 2 server class machines networked with fiber, it's just going to run really slow. I'm just going to warn you now. It's great, but it's not fast because it's just so bloated and it's so big and they try to make it do too much. But it's a good tool. My personal favorite is a tool called X-Ways Forensics. It's made by a gentleman in Germany. It goes back in time. For me, as a lot of people say today, it's more old school. It does all the things the big tools do, but it's faster, slicker, and it's way cheaper. I think now you can actually buy a copy for closer to $700. If you buy Guidance, you're looking at $14,000 to $15,000 for a single license, and FTK I think is still around $8,000. And I haven't checked those prices like in the past month or two, but that's pretty average.
Is that what we use? I've never been in your lab, I don't go in there.
We still have Encase in the lab, we have X-Ways in the lab, we let FTK lapse because we needed the machines and tying them all up. Yeah.
Jim, can you correlate forensics a little bit to cost? Because the students need to understand that just because you do forensics doesn't mean you need the latest and greatest. Sometimes you have cases that require really old software to do the job.
Yes. I have a 12 by 12 2-story storage building in my backyard that is humidity and temperature controlled, that houses the biggest computer museum around here for a reason, because people are constantly getting cases that are sitting on really old computers. I'm fortunate because I remember them and I still have parts for them. My wife calls me a pack rat. Thankfully, she doesn't call me a hoarder because it's only in that one building. But
You're a forensics holder.
exactly. If you get into it and you want to do well, you will start doing things like going to swap meets, going to garage sales. You just hear about stuff. Get with the local ham radio clubs and find out when they're having swap meets. You'd be amazed the stuff those guys have got. And then what I do is, like, there was a type of drive, data drive, known as a zip drive. They originally started out at 100 meg and then went up to like 120 meg. And they had these funky little cartridges that would go in and you store data on. I still have a few.
I still have a zip drive, yeah.
Stashed away because occasionally I will hear, in the grapevine, somebody say, hey, we just, arrested this guy. He's got jillions of DVDs, but he's got a box full of these zips, and we got nothing that reads them. I didn't. And for X dollars each, I'll read them for you and turn them into a DVD. So having stuff like that. The oldest I've gotten so far was a SciQuest drive, which was a spinning glass platter. And they held 88 meg. The big ones held 88. The early ones were 44 meg. And I had a buddy of mine that had a couple, and he's like, dude, do you think you can get anything off these? And here's something you need to know. Media has a lifespan. Hopefully you've heard this before. If not, media has a lifespan. The DVD movie you went and bought today, how long is it good for? Anybody know? Average 7 years. And then you won't be able to read it anymore. It'll start skipping, it'll get fuzzy, it won't work. It will start decaying at about the 7-year mark, depending on how you stored it. If it's set in your car, a year maybe. If it's summertime in Texas, 2 weeks maybe. Okay? If it comes out of there bent, yeah, you're gone. SideQuest drives, they stopped making about 96. And this guy had one that I found that stamps on it said 93, and I still got every piece of data off of it. Nobody's more surprised than me. So, USB thumb drives, who loves them? Because my hand's up, I love them. They're great, okay? How long will they last? That's usually the answer. But you know they have a lifespan? Here's something, especially you forensic guys, you need to know. So, let's say you have a 1 gig USB thumb drive. How much storage is really in there? And I'm not playing the 1024 game, the kilobytes versus actual bytes. How much memory is actually in that 1 gig thumb drive?
I don't know.
3 gig.
Really?
Now, if you've ever heard of making an image of a drive where you take and make a forensic copy of it, you copy bit by bit everything that's in there. And then you typically do what's called hashing it, which means you run an algorithm, usually an MD5, and you get this big 32-digit number that says if you line everything up just like it is in this thumb drive, you will get this number if you do the same calculation. It's the way you prove that nothing's ever been changed in the drive, okay? If you take a forensic image of most USB thumb drives, leave it plugged in for about an hour, image it again, run it another MD5, you gonna get the same MD5? You haven't changed anything. It's just been sitting there idling in the computer. Are you gonna get the same number? No. Nope. Because inside the memory, in 90% of the thumb drives, are these little valleys which can be positively or negatively charged in order to store ones and zeros, which is where everything lives, ones and zeros. How many times can you write to one of these little valleys? 1,000. That's it. That's all they're made to last for. Okay? So what happens is, while it's sitting there running, there's a little operating system inside that thumb drive. And what it's doing is, it's going out and it's looking at these little valleys and it says, how many times have you been written to? 800? Ooh, you're probably getting ready to die. I'm going to take that plus and I'm going to relocate it over here because that's never been written to, and that'll be good for another 1,000. That's why there's 3 gig in there, because what happens is the operating system then makes that one null and void. You are literally eating the memory in the thumb drive just by having it plugged into the computer. What happens when you use up all 3 gig? All of a sudden, oh darn, irrecoverable error, I can't get anything off your thumb drive. The cheaper ones die faster. So most often people say, I just quit working, I can't read anything on it anymore. I know in the back of my head, no, you've been reading and writing to it like crazy, you just ran through all your memory. And yet I know people who store family pictures and family tree stuff on this and lock it in a safe. Also a hugely bad idea, because this is an organic cell, it's not magnetic. And what happens is you don't plug that in once in a while, it evaporates. It goes back to being all zeros, completely erased after a given amount of time. So, USB thumb drives are great for temporary moving, stuff like that. They're real handy for passing stuff between your buds. One of the least safe ways to store things. Now, what else uses this technology? Solid state drives. Who's got a real cool laptop that has a solid state drive in it? So, guess what's going to happen in a while after you've been using the heck out of it? You got to get into the solid state drive. Genius on their part. Because, you know, hard drives would last you forever. You could take it out of one computer, stick it in another one, and it'd just keep chugging along. I don't know. Let's put solid state